Hello, in this video we'll be going over installment notes. An installment note is a note that a corporation has that where the payments are there's equal payments made according to the note, and each payment includes a portion of the interest for the note and a portion of the principal that's being reduced for the note. At the end of the term for the note, there will be a zero balance due and everything will be paid off. Think of if you purchased a car or if you financed the purchase of a car and you have a monthly payment of, let's call it $800 a month, right? That's what you pay the car company every single month. A portion of that $800 will go to interest and a portion will reduce your principal amount. And every month that portion changes, square means change, every month you have some portion going to interest and some portion going to principal, but the allocation between interest and principal changes every month. However, your payments remains the same. You still pay $800 per month. That's called an installment note. Let's go through an example. Skill Graphics purchased a package labeling machine from Hughes Barker Corporation by issuing an installment note that calls for semi-annual payments made at the end of each period for 3 years. The payments include interest at the rate of 14%. The machine could be purchased at a cash price of $666,633. So here's what we for the initial purchase of the machine and the issuance of the note, Skill Graphics is the buyer. They're going to debit the machine for that amount that they could have bought it had they paid cash, the $666,000, and they're going to credit notes payable. They're going to do this. It's going to be a liability on their books for that amount. Hughes Barker, who's the one that sold this label making machine, records a notes receivable for the same amount, debits notes receivable, that's an asset to them, and they're going to credit sales revenue for $666,000. So now we have this information, right? Here's how much our note meaning we are Skill Graphics. This is our note for $666,000, and we have to pay semi-annual payments, so twice a year for 3 years. So we have 6 payments that we need to make that incorporate an interest rate of 14%, and we have to figure out what is going to be our payment every 6 months. And the way we do that is we're going to take the amount of the loan, the $666,000, and we're going to divide it by a factor from the present value tables. So make sure you divide, right? That's really important. And the table that we're going to use is we're going to use the present value of an ordinary annuity. And that's because we're trying to find out the payments, the regular installment payments. So an ordinary annuity finds out the present value of payments, and they're going to be made at the end of each of the periods. So it's going to be made. We're going to issue this note on 1/1/27. I don't think we said that in the beginning, but we're going to make a payment for at June 30th and December 31st. So it's at the end of the period, or I should say not at the very beginning, not on 1/1/27, which means we use the ordinary annuity table. And so now, what interest do we use? What information do we use to figure out which factor we're going to use? N equals 6. I'm just going to erase this real fast. But N equals 6 because we have 6 interest payments. We have semi-annual payments for 3 years. And I equals 7. That's because our interest rate is 14%. But because we have 2 payments per year, we're going to take that 14%, and we have payments every 6 out of 12 months. So that equals 7%. So then you're going to take that loan amount of 666 times this divided by the factor of 4.76654, and you get $139,857. This is your semi-annual payment that will be paid to pay off this loan every 6 months. So now we have our amortization schedule for the installment note. This might look familiar. It's very similar to the effective interest rate method amortization schedule. And we start with the issuance date of 1/1, and our outstanding balance is whatever we record the note payable to be at, which is $666,000. Our first payment is June 30th, and we have a cash payment of $139,857 that we calculated in the previous slide. And the effective interest, so this is going to be, again, just like the effective interest rate method, this is the expense portion. And we're going to take our effective interest rate, our 7%, which is really the 14% that we were told about, but divide by half, and multiply by the beginning outstanding balance, which is the same as the prior period ending. So you take the 7% times the 666,000, and that equals to 46,664. That will be the interest expense portion. Then when you take the total cash payment of 139, minus the interest expense portion, the remaining balance is what we're going to decrease our actual note payable amount by. So you can see that our note payable started at 666, and then we reduced it by 93. So our new outstanding notes payable balance is $573,000. Let's look at the journal entries for that first payment on June 30th. So that's what we're doing, the June 30th. The borrower, right, that's us, debits interest expense for that $46,664,000. The cash payment, which is the installment payment, is a credit for $139,857, and the difference is we debit our notes payable by $93,193, which comes from right here, right? So if you think about a T account, our notes payable T account, we initially put $666,633 on here on 1/1/27, and then for this payment, this June 30th payment, we debited notes payable for $93,193. So our new outstanding balance is $573,440, and we're going to keep reducing this note payable until it comes down to zero. The seller also has a similar entry, but on the flip side, they received cash of $139,000, so they're going to debit their cash account, and they need to recognize interest revenue the same way that the borrower recognized interest expense. The seller will recognize interest revenue. They're going to credit their interest revenue, and then the notes receivable that they have on their books will be credited as each payment is made. Let's go on to our second payment on 12/31. Again, same cash payment of $139,857, which we had to calculate. We're going to take our effective interest rate, which is 7%, times our beginning outstanding balance, or our prior period ending balance, right here, that $573,440, and that gives us $40,141. I'm going to take my $139,000 less my $139,000 cash payment minus my $40,000 interest, and my decrease in my notes payable balance will be $99,716, and you can see my outstanding balance is starting to go down. So let's go over the journal entry that we would record on December 31st. This is the second payment. Skill Graphics, the borrower, is going to debit interest expense for the $40,141. Credit cash for the payment, same entry, same amount every single payment, $139,000, and then the difference will be a debit to the notes payable account. And then Hughes Barker, as the seller, will debit the cash for $139,000, credit interest revenue for the same amount as interest expense was recorded by the borrower for $40,141, and they will credit their notes receivable for the same amount that we debited our notes payable for $99,716. So let's look at this amortization schedule to the very end. We started with our initial booking of our notes payable for $666,000 on January 1. We went through these first two payments, and then there's 4 more payments left, right? Because it's a 3-year note paid semi-annually. And you can see the cash payment is the same every single payment date. And it's the effective interest, I'm going to put expense up here, that is different every single period, right? Because you're going to take the 7% effective interest rate multiplied by the beginning outstanding balance. And we're going to decrease our notes payable, whereas at the end, we have decreased it now for $666,633. And so notice that the outstanding balance at the end of the 3 years is 0. This is different when we do notes payable and bonds payable, where the outstanding balance is always the face value of that note payable or bond payable. So installment note is you pay off the entire amount down to 0. The other thing I want to point out is this decrease in the notes payable balance. The amount that we are debiting each payment to notes payable increases each period, and the amount we're debiting to the interest expense decreases each period. So you see we start out with 46, but it goes down all the way to 9,100 by the end. And in here, right, we start out with 93 and it increases each period. And that kind of, if you think about back to the car example, when you're making your $800 a month payment, the earlier payments go more, and you're looking between interest and principal, the earlier payments go more towards interest. And then as time goes on, because then it's going to be more principal and less interest as time goes on, because they want you to pay off more interest first rather than principal. We're going to go through a couple examples. Kazali Industries purchased a machine from Keefe Corporation on October 1. In payment for the $432,000 purchase, Kazali issued a 1-year installment note to be paid in equal monthly payments at the end of each month. The payments include interest rate at the rate of 12%. What are the monthly installment payments? So this is a 1-year note where the payments are made monthly, and we're giving this rate of 12%. This is an annual rate. Anytime you're given a rate, unless it specifies otherwise, which it won't, this is an annual rate. So when we look at, we need to calculate the monthly payments using a monthly rate, we're going to have to take that 12% divided by 12 months. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our payable, our note payable, which is going to be the $432,000, and again we're going to divide it by the present value of an ordinary annuity, right? We're going to look at that table, and we're going to have n equals 12 because we have monthly payments for 1 year, so we have 12 payments, and the I equals 1 because this is the annual rate, so we need to divide by our number of payments, which is 12, and that gives us a monthly installment payment of $38,383. In each subsequent cash payment on an installment note, which one of the following is true? The amount of principal paid decreases, the amount of principal paid increases, amount of interest paid increases, or the amount paid for both interest and principal increase proportionally. So this is what I was talking about when you have your, let's say your $800 a month payment for your car, and the split between interest and principal. You have more interest for the first months, and then as the months go along, then you have more interest, more principal, and less interest. So in each subsequent cash payment on installment note, the amount of principal that's paid off increases. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, right here, and this is where we can see, let me just erase some of it. Here's what we're talking about that for each payment, you can see this is the principal payoff column. Each payment, the amount of principal that's paid off increases. So that's what that question was talking about. Last question is, Vernoy Company purchased a machine from Chun Corporation on October 31, 2027. In payment for the $576,000 purchase, Vernoy issued a one-year installment note to be paid in equal monthly payments of $51,176 at the end of each month. So in this situation, they've already given us what that monthly payment is going to be, the installment payment. The payments include interest at the rate of 12%. The amount of interest expense that Vernoy will report in its income statement for the year ended December 31, 2027 is what? So first, this note was issued on October 31, and we need to know the interest expense for December 31. So first thing we need to know is we're going to calculate interest expense for 2 months, for November and December. So we know for the month of November and December, our cash payment is going to be $51,176. So we're going to have a credit to cash. And I'm just going to pop up the journal entry. So here's our cash payment for $51,176. The interest expense is going to be our outstanding balance, which on November 30th is still the initial, what we initially recorded that note for, which is $576,000 times 1%, because this 12% interest rate that we're given is an annual rate, and this is a monthly payment, so we have to divide by 12. So our interest expense for November, right here, is $5,760, and then the difference between our cash payment and our interest expense is going to be a debit to our note payable for $45. Now we have to calculate for December. So we're still going to have a cash payment in December for $51. Let me just pretend. Let me do the December numbers here real quick. For that, so that was November. For December, what we're going to have, now I'm going to do December. I'm going to have a cash payment of $51,176. That stays the same. My December interest expense amount is going to be 1% times my outstanding balance. My outstanding balance is my beginning balance of $576, except that in November, I reduced my note payable by $45,416. So when you take that number, that equals to $530,584, and you multiply that by 1%, and you get 5,306, and then the difference between the $51,576 and the 5,306 will be the debit to the note payable, which is 45. I'm going to do it here. Actually, 45,870, and this debit is 5,306. I'm just going to erase it so it's not as confusing. So for December, my debit to interest expense is 5,306. Debit notes payable 45,870. Credit cash 51,176. My total interest expense for 2024 is going to be my November interest plus my December interest. So the answer is $11,066. Just from this one problem, there's so many things that could be asked either on a test or on the CPA exam. It could tell you what's the note, how much did my note payable get reduced in 2024? Or what did my note payable get reduced by in December? There's just so many questions, so you really need to understand all of it because you really could be asked anything.